of Judah into Nebuchadnezzar's hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. You notice it says there some of the articles, not all the articles. Remember, the Jewish temple is a huge temple. It's a beautiful temple that King Solomon had created, just a wonder of the world. And Nebuchadnezzar, by taking some of the items, is in fact sort of saying, okay, Jewish people, you can keep worshiping your Yahweh God, but I'm going to take some of the idols, or some of the supplies, the utensils that you have, articles, and I'm going to, the end of this verse 2 says, I'm going to carry them off to Babylon, and I'm going to put them in the treasure house of my god, Marduk. Marduk was Nebuchadnezzar's god. In other words, saying, my God is greater than your God. It's like growing up as a little kid saying, my daddy can beat your daddy up. My God is greater than your God. How do we know that? Because I ransacked your temple and took some, not all, but some of your religious holy items. So Nebuchadnezzar and his army take some of these items, they take them back to Babylon. Verse 3. Then the king ordered Ashpenazar, chief of the court officials, to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. Not only did Nebuchadnezzar take some of the religious articles, but he also took the cream of the crop of the people. What we read here, the cream of the crop. Verse 4. Young men without any physical defect. She thought they were probably around age 16, 17 years old, of the noble families. Young men without any physical defect. They were handsome. They showed aptitude for every kind of learning. They were well informed. They were quick to understand. They were qualified to serve in the king's palace. If you ever read this, don't you find it interesting? I find it interesting that Nebuchadnezzar would take some of the captives that he has conquered and want to use them in his own palace as counselors. That sounds a little bit different. It would be like us when we're still overseas. But if we overseas and we take some of the people from Iran or Iraq or Afghanistan and bring them back here and put them in a high position in our government. You put it like that and say, wait a minute, what's Nebuchadnezzar doing? I mean, I don't think we today would necessarily want to do that, but he's trying to blend the nation into one. And this is interesting here. It says here, he was to teach them, so this chief of the court officials was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. So teach them something totally different than what they've been learning. Teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians, and the king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after this training they were to enter the king's service. Among these three were from Judah. But we tend to only hear about the 3 and Daniel, so 4, but there were more than that. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and whatever his last name is, first name. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. I mean, most of the time when you're growing up and we hear about the 3 people in the fiery furnace, we call them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We call them by their Babylonian name. Ever think about that? Call them by their Babylonian name, not by their Jewish name. But what's interesting here is Nebuchadnezzar wants to change their thinking. Change their thinking. What do I mean? They're going to be trained in the language and the education of the Babylonians. So Nebuchadnezzar wants to change these conquered teenagers' way of thinking. No longer Jewish way of thinking, but a Babylon way of thinking. but he also wants to change their lifestyle. How's he doing that? The food that they eat. He's to teach, they're to be assigned a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. So Nebuchadnezzar understands, in order to get these people to change their allegiance from their home country that I kidnapped them from, I got to change their education, their educational system, the way they think, what they're taught. I also need to change what they eat, how they eat, the drinks that they have in their life. So everything that is consumed in them internally for the food. But also, besides the thinking and the lifestyle, is a change of loyalty. Loyalty? He changed their names. They changed their names. It's interesting, if you look up on the screen, Daniel in Hebrew means God is my judge. And his Babylonian name means may Baal protect his life, one of the gods of the Babylonians. Hananiah means Jehovah is gracious. His Babylonian name, Shadrach, means command of Aku, or moon god, another Babylonian god. So every time that he was called Shadrach, it reminded him, oh yeah, moon god. Not Jehovah God, but the Babylonian god. The other individual's Jewish name, who is he that is God? But his Babylonian name, Meshach, is who is what Aku is, the moon god. Again, changing their thought process, their educational process, the loyalty to the gods of Babylon. The last one, Jehovah has helped. Jehovah has helped? Wait a minute, I'm 17 years old. I was just kidnapped by Nebuchadnezzar. I've drugged 500 miles to a foreign nation, and my name means Jehovah has helped me? Well, the Babylonian name that he has, Abednego, servant of Nebo, which is the sun or the morning star god for the Babylonians. Do you see what's going on here? I think this is just so amazing. The fact that Nebuchadnezzar understands he's got to change their thinking, got to change their loyalty, got to change their lifestyle. Turn with me to John 15. It's not up on the screen, but John 15. John 15, verse 19. You see, friends, we tend to live in two worlds. These 4 teenagers were brought up in Jerusalem, brought up with Yahweh God, Jehovah, brought to a different country, and their loyalty, their lifestyle, and their thinking, people tried to change. John 15, 19. This is Jesus speaking. Starting with verse 18. If the world hates you, keep in mind that the world hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. But as it is, you don't belong to the world. But I have chosen you out of the world, and that is why the world hates you. You and I live in two worlds. We live in Jerusalem, we live in Babylon. We live in faith, we live in the flesh. And when I read this, I wonder sometimes which one wins out. Which one wins out within us? Does the faith that the Lord has planted within us? Or does the flesh, sort of that instant gratification? Now, we live in a microwave society. We live in a society that basically, if any of us want something, for many people, they can just go out and get it. Or if they don't have the cash handy, they got a credit card. They can swipe it and pay for it later. Live in the world of the flesh. Turn with me to Romans. Romans 12. Romans 12, verse 1 and 2.